If you want to have success as an agency signed model, make sure that you watch this video on learning the insiders of what happens at a casting so that you can increase your odds of booking the job. Hey there, it is your girl Kamla-Kay. I am an agency signed professional model, posing coach, and modeling mentor. So I have booked print jobs and TV commercials here in the United States and overseas, and I educate aspiring models on how to get agency signed. I coach on how to pose to have better images on camera, because let's face it, if you cannot pose well on camera, chances are agencies and clients are not going to want to continuously book you for a job. Since I am a commercial model myself, for instance, I have modeled for brands such as Kohl's, Stella McCartney, Disney. I am going to give you some insiders of what happens at auditions, at castings, and some tips to help you succeed along this journey. Let's just start from the beginning. When I get an audition, what usually happens is my agency will send me an email, and one of two things can happen. They can send an email and they will say, for instance, hey, we have an audition for, let's just say Mac, right? I'm just making this up. We have an audition for MacBook, and the shoot dates are these dates, the fitting dates. The fitting is the date that you would go to have your outfits selected by the client for the job. They're like, the fitting date is this date, for instance, and the audition date are these series of dates. And they'll say to me, are you available? Now, some agencies, they don't ask if you're available. They just automatically submit you to that job. So it depends on the agency that you have. It depends on the type of contract you have, which contracts are a whole other video. But essentially, there's going to be some information that comes to you that says about a specific casting. Now, let's say that the agency does submit you for this casting, the client comes back and approves you to audition, and then you have all the details and you show up to the audition. What can you expect in that way? First and foremost, before you show up to the audition, make sure that you really read the casting specifications. And if you don't have any specifications, make sure that you ask your agency this question before you attend the casting. For instance, when my agencies send me an audition request from a client, especially as a commercial model, they always tell us what is the specific job that we're applying for as the model in this print ad or commercial, right? So let's talk about your attire before you get to the audition, right? So in this sense, let's say that you're auditioning for a job where you are going to be wearing a bathing suit. Maybe it's for a client that does tourism or a boat job, whatever the case is, right? And you know, okay, I'm gonna need to wear a bathing suit because the casting specification says that. You need to show up in that attire. So for instance, here is an ad that I am in inside of a magazine. There I am right there. And I am on a boat and I am in a bathing suit. So in this audition, I actually had to audition in a bathing suit. So those are the things that you would need to know in advance so that you can dress appropriately for that role. If your agency sends you an email and they do not specify the specific role or the attire, you should always ask them, because you don't want to show up to an audition and you're completely inappropriately dressed for this specific role. So once you have your attire and you show up to the casting, what happens now once you step through the door? Typically what happens is you're gonna walk in and there's going to be a sign-in sheet. Obviously, some casting directors, casting locations, they have different sign-in processes. Some people, you're just gonna sign your name, your agency, your email, your height, your age. Sometimes they ask you all those details on the sign-in sheet on a paper form. Sometimes you're going to sign in using an iPad. So sometimes when you sign in with an iPad, the client is going to already have your specifications in the system because of us using websites such as castingnetworks.com that lists and hosts our profile. So for instance, let's say the client is using an iPad, maybe all you're gonna have to do is type in your name, and then all the information is gonna come up from the back end of what your agency and these casting sites have, and then you just click your name and you sign in. Before I continue, if you have not already subscribed to my channel, make sure that you do so. I do have tons of videos on here about modeling agency contracts, portfolio developments, things of that nature. Also, go to the description area because I do have a link to some guides there, and also to my perfect poses posing course. Because again, if you're a model and you can't pose, you are going to continuously miss out on opportunities. So I do have a full-length video posing course that breaks down all aspects of your body, different facial expressions. It has affirmations and all of those mindset shifts that you need to help propel you into this zone of being a successful model. So once you get to this area, different things can happen depending on the role. If it's a print job, sometimes, depending on the brand, this sometimes happens more with fashion clients, but in general, it can happen with any client. Sometimes a client is going to take maybe your body measurements, because sometimes there are jobs where they're specifically needing a set size, right? Because of whatever the clothing is. Or let's say, for instance, I have done jobs where I have been a foot model. So even the rest of my body didn't show in some of them. Sometimes my entire body showed, and it was for like a shoe company, for instance. So sometimes the client may need to know specifically that you wear only, a size shoe that is between like a 7 to 7.5 or an 8 to 8.5, or sometimes they have very specific requirements. And so you will be measured sometimes depending on the specifications. Other times the client, when you go to a casting to get this modeling job, they may put you on video. So they may ask you several questions, right? So they may first ask you to do a slate. And when you do a slate, again, depending on the role, depending on the casting director, they may have different things that they can ask. So for instance, with a slate, it's usually something that says your name, your height, your agency, your profiles. So you would actually turn your body, 90 degrees to the left, 90 degrees to the right, so that they can see both sides of your face. And sometimes they'll ask you to do a full body turn as well. And so the introduction to yourself is called a slate on camera. Sometimes also at auditions, if it is where they're video recording you, they may throw you a curveball and they'll say, tell us something interesting about yourself. This is when you should already have that answer prepared. So for instance, let's say that you are an art teacher and you're really good at creating sculptures, or you play pickleball, or you have traveled to 30 different countries. It doesn't have to be anything specific. It just has to be something that'll make them say, oh wow, that's pretty cool, that's interesting. So already know the answer to that, because it's a common question that is asked by clients to models. So we've talked about making sure that you've dressed the part. We have mentioned what happens when you actually enter. There's the whole sign-in process. There's the process of the client making you do a slate so that they can capture you on camera, so that later down the rest of the day or the rest of the week, when they're deciding what models they want to book, they have that basic information of you to start out their video, right? The other option is they may actually take some photos of you. So especially again, if it's a print job, maybe it's something where if it's a clothing brand, right, they'll have you try on various outfits from their clothing line, and they'll take photos of you to see how well does this fit this model's body. Do they look good in our wardrobe? Whatever the case is, that is an option as well. Now, let's say that it's a casting where it is for a TV commercial. In that sense, there is going to be the opportunity for you to really showcase your personality and your ability to follow directions on camera. Following directions is so very important in this industry when you go to auditions, because let's just say, for instance, even if it's a print job, and again, if the client asks you to do or say certain things on camera and you can't follow their thought process to get that done, automatically they're like, we don't want to work with that person because they can't take basic, simple directions, or they can't think quickly on their feet when we ask them a question like, tell us something cool about yourself, right? So for instance, if it is a TV commercial audition, sometimes you are going to have to act out a role. So even this one, for instance, where I showed you where me being in this magazine, even though this became a print ad, making sure you could see it there. Boom, there I am. So even though this was a print ad, believe it or not, the audition that I had to do to get myself inside this magazine is that I had to audition, and then I had to pretend that I was just like on the beach with some friends, interacting, taking a sip of my drink. And how would I be if I was just enjoying a beautiful day at the beach, right? Without being awkward. So little things like knowing how to act on camera is going to be so vital to your role as a model. So a lot of times we're thinking, oh, I want to be a model, like I just need to have a pretty face. No, that is not the case when it comes to modeling, especially if you are in the commercial lifestyle space, especially if you are a mature model. There's going to be the expectation that you're more than just a face, that you can deliver personality and expressions on camera. Another example of what happens with the auditions, being at these auditions, right, is you may have to act out a specific scene. So for instance, I'm sure you have seen commercials for brands such as Home Depot or Kohl's or Lowe's, like all of those companies, and you're thinking like, okay, Home Depot and Kohl's, not really the modeling thing that I'm thinking of, right? But again, a lot of those brands, they're hiring people who are assigned to modeling agencies because they want a certain look. So even if you're thinking like, okay, well, this is more acting. No, a lot of times, yes, actors are going for those auditions, but also models are going for those auditions as well. So if you can follow the directions of what the director is telling you, as a model, you can book those jobs. And sometimes those jobs pay thousands of dollars per day. So it's really important that you don't necessarily limit yourself in the thought process of what you need to be a model. And a lot of times people, they focus on this, right? And they don't focus on the other characteristics of personality and being able to showcase expressions, directions, different characters on film, because that increases your odds of booking the jobs. Final thought process on getting to agency castings and booking those jobs is, once all of these processes have been finished at the casting location and they're like, they'll say things like, thank you so much for coming, we'll be in touch, or obviously they'll be in touch with your agency. But sometimes when it comes to castings, you don't know for several days, maybe several weeks, depending on how far out the job is from the casting. But there are a lot of castings that take place, and within a week's time, they're booking the models. But just keep in mind that the casting directors, even sometimes the agencies, they don't update you on if you got the job or not. So sometimes you just really have to pay attention to your calendar, making sure that if you did audition for a job, and let's just say hypothetically the job said it was April 1st, make sure that on your calendar you have a note that says April 1st, because it's possible that a few days before that date, right, that's when your agency will reach out and say, hey, Kamla, you booked the job. And if you forgot that you auditioned for that or forgot to save those dates, guess what? They're going to pick another model. Your agency is going to be really annoyed. The client's going to be annoyed. It's going to potentially limit you from booking other jobs with this casting director. So keep all of those things in mind. When you audition, make sure that you have checked your calendar and know that you will be available for these dates. All right, that is it for this video on becoming an agency signed model and actually getting to castings and knowing the process of what takes place once you're in the castings. I will see you in the next video. Again, I am Kamla-Kay, and comment below if you have any questions.